The doorbell rang sharply, cutting through the quiet Saturday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before walking across the foyer. As I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a woman who looked to be no older than 25. Blonde, tall, and impossibly sleek, she was dressed in a fitted dress that looked like it cost more than most people's rent. She smiled at me, her gaze already drifting past me into the house, clearly expecting me to step aside. She held out her coat to me, and before I could even react, she said, "Tell Richard I'm here." I blinked, completely caught off guard. "Excuse me." She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Then, with a wave of her hand, she dismissed me. "You're the help, right? You should know where Richard is." A wave of confusion rolled over me. I stood there, staring at her for a moment, unsure how to process what she'd just said. The help, me. The wife of Richard Montgomery, the man she was here to see. I felt my fingers curl around the edges of her coat, like I was holding on to something that wasn't quite real. She hadn't even bothered to introduce herself, assuming I knew exactly who she was. But I could feel it, the arrogance radiating from her, the unspoken entitlement she wore as if it was another accessory. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, still standing in the doorway, feeling the sharp sting of humiliation creep up my neck. She flashed me a wide, dismissive smile. "I'm Alexis," she said, as if that name alone explained everything. Richard's girlfriend. The word hung in the air between us, and I couldn't swallow it fast enough. The girlfriend. Not just that, but the girlfriend. The one who walked right into my house in front of me. As if she had every right to be here. I tried to hold my ground. "And you think I'm the help?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly though I willed it not to. She laughed, a soft, derisive sound that cut through the tension. "Well, yes, obviously. Though Richard usually has better dressed staff. Are you new staff?" My stomach churned. She thought I was the help, in my own house. I had spent 12 years building this life, this home, this marriage, and she waltzed in, making comments about how this place needs updating, and how she'd talk to Richard about it. Like she could walk into my life and rearrange it like a piece of furniture she didn't care about. "I've been here 12 years, I said, my voice now flat, the sting of her words settling deep. 12 years. I wasn't sure why I felt the need to defend myself to her, to explain this to someone who clearly had no concept of loyalty or history. She rolled her eyes. "The help always exaggerates their tenure. Just tell Richard I'm here. I'll be in the living room." With that, she walked past me, brushing against my shoulder like I didn't even matter. I felt my heart drop into my stomach, as she made her way toward the living room, kicking her heels casually as she moved. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, still holding her coat, my fingers numb. My mind was a whirlwind, and I could feel the faintest tremor in my hands as I closed the door behind me. In the living room, Alexis had already settled herself on the couch. She flung her feet up on the coffee table, our coffee table, the one Richard and I bought together at an estate sale, in our first year of marriage. The one we worked on in our garage, turning it into something more than just a table. It was ours. She called out to me, as if I were her servant. "Could you bring me some water? With lemon, not too much ice." I swallowed hard, trying to force my anger down. I moved to the kitchen, grabbed a glass, and poured her some water without lemon, too much ice, or anything else she had requested. When I handed it to her, she raised an eyebrow. "No lemon. Too much ice." "Too much ice," I repeated flatly. She sighed like I'd personally offended her. "Is Richard training you? This is not how he likes things done." "How does Richard like things done?" I wanted to laugh, or scream. I felt an icy chill settle inside me as I met her gaze. "How does Richard like things done?" I repeated the question, the weight of it pressing down on me. How had I missed this? The lies, the deception, the way he'd slipped away from me, year after year, leaving me to believe in something that had always been nothing but a fragile illusion. Alexis didn't seem to notice the tension in my voice. Or perhaps she simply didn't care. She went on as if it were just another normal Saturday. "Richard usually has a better system for his staff. I'm usually here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when his wife is at work. Sometimes Saturdays, if she's at book club." "I don't have a book club," I said quietly, the words finally hitting their mark. Her expression faltered for a second, but it was gone in an instant. She smiled, but it was hollow, like she had already forgotten who she was speaking to. "You seem to know a lot about his wife," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. She laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. "I know enough. Older, let herself go, boring. Richard's only with her for the convenience. He says that all the time." I unconsciously touched my face. I was 37. Some lines had started to form, sure, but I wasn't frumpy. Was I? She continued without missing a beat. Richard deserves better, don't you think? Someone young, beautiful, who understands his needs. Not some housewife who probably thinks missionary is adventurous. Her words burned, but they also felt like they were being said to someone else. Not meh. I clenched my fists by my sides. Maybe she works, I said, trying to hold on to some shred of dignity. Oh, please. Alexis scoffed, her face twisting in disgust. Richard says she has some little job at a company. Probably a receptionist or something, nothing important. My heart skipped a beat. I almost wanted to laugh. Her little job, the company I founded and ran. The company that paid for this house, our house. The one that had kept Richard's practice afloat, when he couldn't keep it from sinking. C was the one who kept us afloat. C was the one who sacrificed, who worked myself to the bone to build something from the ground up. And now I was standing here, being called nothing, by a woman who thought she was entitled to everything. I turned toward the kitchen, unable to look at her any longer. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone. Richard was at his golf club following his usual Saturday routine. I texted him, come home, emergency with the house. A few seconds later his response came, in the middle of a game, I'll be home in 15. I texted again, the ceiling in your office has collapsed. You need to come home immediately. And then I turned back to face Alexis, my pulse racing, my mind spinning. Richard's on his way, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled, as if I had just confirmed everything she needed to know. Finally. I've been waiting to surprise him, she said, sitting back on the couch. We're going to Cabo next week. I booked the villa and everything. Cabo, expensive. Richard was paying, of course. He always paid. That's what real men did, right? She looked at me again, a gleam in her eyes. Richard's so generous, she said, as if she hadn't already taken enough. He buys me everything I want. I stood there, still holding Alexis's coat, my mind whirling. This was real. The woman who was standing in front of me, sitting on my couch, was Richard's girlfriend. She was so young, so confident, everything I was not anymore. Or maybe, everything I was supposed to be, but had lost somewhere along the way. She looked at me like I was a shadow in my own home, a ghost she couldn't even bother to acknowledge. Richard's only with you for convenience, she said, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. He says that all the time. He's just stuck with you because it's easier than leaving. I felt the words hit like a slap. I was frozen for a second, standing by the door with her coat in my hands, trying to wrap my mind around it. Richard had actually said that, to her. To his mistress. The one who had just barged into our life like she had a claim to it. I built this life, I muttered under my breath, more to myself than to her. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. She was too busy making herself at home in the place that had once been mine and Richard's. Her feet, now bare, were propped up on my coffee table, our coffee table. The one Richard and I had found at that estate sale. The one I refinished with him, sanding the wood late into the night, dreaming of the future we'd have. You know, Alexis continued, her voice laced with a hint of condescension, Richard deserves better. Someone young, someone who understands his needs. Not someone who's just settled. I clenched my jaw, the words stinging far more than I wanted to admit. Older, let herself go, she said, practically reading off a list. Boring. He probably only stays because it's cheaper to keep you than get a divorce. It felt like the air had thickened around me, suffocating me. I couldn't breathe for a moment, the rage threatening to spill over. Was she really saying this to my face? I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to remain steady. How does Richard like things done? Alexis blinked at me, as if she hadn't expected the question. He likes things done properly, efficiently, with respect, she said, as though she were describing the best kind of room service. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or scream. Is Richard training you? She asked, eyeing me like I was the one out of place. What do you mean? I asked, barely able to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Are you new staff? Because Richard usually hires staff that's better dressed. She looked me up and down, her gaze dismissive. I'm his wife, I said flatly, my words hitting her like a cold slap. His wife. She stared at me, blinking like she didn't understand what I was saying. Then, as if she'd been struck by a thought, she said, oh, you're the one he's stuck with. I get it now. Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. The truth was, I'd known Richard wasn't completely faithful to me for a while, but hearing it from her, hearing her describe me like I was a mistake he'd settled for, felt like I was being torn apart from the inside out. I wanted to scream at her, but instead, I swallowed my anger, the cold realization settling in, This wasn't just a fling. This was Richard's life now, a life I wasn't even invited to be a part of. Where's Richard? Alexis asked, looking around the house with the ease of someone who had been here countless times before. I snapped. He's not here. Oh, well, when will he be back? She asked, as if I owed her some kind of answer. I don't have all day. Her tone was so casual, so entitled, that it made me sick. Here she was, in my house, using my husband's money, mocking the life we built together. And yet, she was acting like she owned everything. The more I looked at her, the more it became clear, this wasn't some innocent affair. This was a woman who had learned how to manipulate Richard, how to get whatever she wanted, and how to make herself the center of his world. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. I don't have all day either, but Richard isn't here, and you're not welcome in my home. She raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by my words, but she shrugged it off. Well, when he comes back, tell him I'm waiting. She turned away from me, dismissing me once more, as if I were nothing but the help. I forced myself to remain still. Part of me wanted to storm out of the room, to break down, to do something, but another part, the stronger part, knew that I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel, not yet, not until I had all the facts. As Alexis got comfortable on my couch, her feet still resting on the coffee table, I turned toward the kitchen, clenching my fists. The rage burned in my chest, but I pushed it down, focusing instead on the plan that was beginning to form. I was done being passive. Done pretending that this was something I could ignore. Richard had been hiding something from me, and I would find out exactly what it was. I had no choice now. This was my life, my marriage, and I was going to take control of it, even if it meant tearing everything down to the ground. I grabbed my phone and typed the words that would change everything. Come home. Emergency with the house. Richard texted back quickly, saying he was at his golf club, in the middle of a game. I knew that meant he'd be gone for a while. I didn't care. I texted back, the ceiling in your office has collapsed. You need to come home immediately. As I waited for him to respond, I went back to Alexis, who had made herself entirely too comfortable in my space. We need to talk, I said, my voice cold, but controlled. I wasn't sure what this conversation was going to be yet, but I knew it was going to be one I'd remember for the rest of my life. The doorbell rang then, and the sound of Richard's arrival sent a jolt of cold clarity through me. It was time for everything to change. I had barely set the glass of water on the coffee table when I heard the sound of Richard's car pulling into the driveway. I didn't move from my spot in the kitchen. Alexis didn't seem to notice. She was still lounging on the couch, casually flipping through her phone, completely at ease, like she belonged there. I stood still, breathing in the sharp scent of the house, my house, gripping the edge of the counter as my thoughts scrambled to make sense of everything. My stomach churned. The truth was undeniable now. All the little signs, all the late nights, the secretive glances, the hollow promises, all of it had led me here, to this very moment. Alexis was here, in my home, Richard's mistress, and she was sitting there like she owned the place, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. The door opened, and I heard Richard's footsteps in the foyer. He was always light on his feet, but today, I noticed the slight hesitation in his step. Like he knew something was wrong, like he could sense that everything was about to change. Fiona, he called out, his voice tentative. What's going on? I didn't answer immediately. I just turned to face Alexis, who still hadn't looked up from her phone. Her fingers were moving quickly over the screen, but I could see her eyes darting toward the door. Already knowing what was coming, I heard Richard's voice again, louder this time. Fiona, where he stopped in the doorway, and I saw the recognition hit him all at once. His eyes flicked from me to Alexis, and his face went white. His breath hitched as he took in the scene. Alexis, he said, sounding almost shocked. What are you doing here? She smiled, the same carefree smile she had when she first walked in, but now it had a little too much edge to it. Surprise, she exclaimed, standing up, her voice too bright. I came to see you. She took a step forward as if she expected a hug, but Richard didn't move. He just stood there frozen, his eyes shifting back and forth between her and me. I didn't know you were, he stammered, then stopped himself as his eyes met mine. I stood in the kitchen, watching him. Watching his panic, the way his mouth opened and closed like he was searching for words, but none of them seemed to be the right ones. I saw the crack in his armor, the cracks I had been missing for so long, but now they were undeniable. Alexis, he started again, his voice strained. What's going on? I didn't expect you. She laughed, completely unaware of the tension. Well, you should have expected me, she said, brushing past him and walking toward me. Your help here was very accommodating, though not exactly up to par. She shot me a look, a dismissive once, over that was meant to sting. But I didn't flinch. I had no intention of giving her the satisfaction. Excuse me, I said, my voice low but clear. I'm his wife. The words hung in the air for a long beat. Alexis blinked at me, clearly caught off guard by the unexpected challenge in my tone. She stared at me for a second, then at Richard, who was still standing in the doorway, rooted to the spot. Wife. She blinked again, and then the realization hit her, slowly, like a train wreck in slow motion. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, and her smile faltered, the confidence draining from her face. Yes, I said, cutting her off. I'm his wife. Of 12 years. Her expression shifted then, a flash of guilt passing across her face, before it disappeared as quickly as it came. But I saw it. And I wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. Richard's eyes darted between us, and for the first time I saw him nervous. He reached for his tie, loosening it, a nervous habit of his when he felt cornered. His shoulders hunched slightly as if preparing to back away from whatever was coming next. Fiona, Richard said, his voice a little strained now, this isn't what you think. What I think. I cut him off, my voice sharp now, the anger bubbling up. What do you think I think, Richard? You think I didn't notice the extra charges on our credit card? You think I didn't see the receipts for dinners, that cost more than our monthly grocery bill? How many times do you think I've sat at my desk, balancing budgets, knowing full well that I've been paying for your affair? Richard's face went pale, and I saw him visibly flinch. His lips pressed together as if trying to keep his composure, but I could see it in his eyes. He was scared. Scared that the truth was coming to light. Scared that there was no more place to hide. Fiona, Richard began again, but his voice trailed off. He couldn't even finish the sentence. He couldn't lie anymore. The cracks were too deep. I've supported you for 12 years, Richard, I continued, stepping forward, the anger in my chest turning into something cold. I put you through medical school. I worked 2 jobs. I supported us, while you were out pretending to be a successful doctor. But you were always too proud to admit the truth, weren't you? Too proud to admit that it's my company that's been keeping us afloat. You've been hiding behind my success while you play at being a big shot with her, I said, pointing toward Alexis. Alexis's eyes flitted to Richard, her face paling slightly, but she said nothing. She just stood there, caught between the two of us, not knowing how to play this new hand she had been dealt. I turned back to Richard, my voice now steady, though it cut like glass. You don't get to keep hiding behind me. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with the secrets. Richard stood there, mouth agape, eyes darting between me and Alexis. The silence stretched, unbearable, until I broke it. Leave, I said, my voice final, and for the first time in years, I felt something like power in my words. I want you to pack your things and leave. Right now. Richard's eyes went wide, and he opened his mouth, probably to protest, but I wasn't having it. Nowed. He didn't argue. He knew there was nothing left to say. Nothing left to protect him. Slowly, like a man walking to his own execution, he turned and walked upstairs, the weight of the situation pressing down on him with every step. I stayed in the kitchen, my heart pounding. Alexis, still sitting on my couch, hadn't moved. She was staring at her phone again, probably calculating how to salvage her own pathetic little fantasy of a life with Richard. The sound of footsteps upstairs stopped, and I waited, watching Alexis, waiting for the inevitable. Richard's time was up. I stood by the kitchen counter, feeling the heaviness in the air, a silence thick enough to swallow everything. Richard had just gone upstairs, and I was left with Alexis, who seemed completely at ease with the chaos unfolding around her. I couldn't let this go on. I had to make it stop. I had to face it all head on. I walked into the living room, my feet barely making a sound on the polished wood floors. Alexis glanced up from her phone, her smile still glued to her face as if she had no idea what was coming. I cleared my throat to get her attention. I'm done, I said, my voice low but steady. Alexis raised an eyebrow, still unfazed. Done with what? The lies, I said. I'm done pretending I didn't know. Done pretending that Richard didn't betray me every way possible. My voice cracked slightly, but I fought to steady it. I wasn't going to cry in front of her. Not now. Not ever again. I turned to face her fully. You and Richard, you think you've been clever, don't you? Sneaking around, using my money, my life to fund your little affair. It's pathetic. Alexis opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand. No, let me finish. I stepped closer to her, feeling the power of the moment surge in me. I've seen everything. I've been covering his mistakes for years, covering our mistakes. But it's clear to me now. Richard's been living a double life for months, draining us dry, while you've been living the life he promised me. Her eyes flickered with something, maybe guilt, maybe shame, but she quickly masked it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, I scoffed. Really? You don't? How convenient. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the credit card statements I had been reviewing earlier that day. The numbers were staggering, the luxury dinners, the designer shopping sprees, the weekend trips to places I couldn't even pronounce. I had been too focused on work, too absorbed in keeping our business running, to realize where our money was really going. I threw the phone down on the coffee table in front of her. The screen lit up with a charge from a jewelry store. Deloth 200 at Tiffany's, I said flatly. Did Richard really think I wouldn't notice? Alexis glanced down at the phone, then back up at me. Her face flushed, and her lips parted in disbelief, like she didn't know whether to apologize or make an excuse. You've been using my money, I continued, my voice rising now. I've been paying for everything, for his medical practice that's been failing for 3 years, for this house, for your vacations, all of it. I paused, watching her squirm as she glanced at the phone again. The silence hung heavy between us. Richard doesn't tell you, does he? I asked. About the debts, about the loans in both our names, the ones he's been hiding. She didn't answer. She just sat there, her eyes wide, looking between me and the phone as if everything she thought she knew was falling apart in front of her. Richard, I said slowly, letting the weight of his name hang in the air, is a liar. And you, Alexis, you're not just some innocent bystander here. You've been complicit. You've been living off of my work, my income, and I've had enough. I watched as her face shifted, her bravado crumbling like a house of cards. She opened her mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. There was nothing left to say, nothing to justify the stolen moments, the stolen money, nothing that could make me feel sorry for her. You've been playing a game, and now it's over, I said. You've been living in a fantasy world, where Richard could keep you and me both on his leash. But that's not how it works anymore. Alexis looked at Richard's empty chair, the one he'd been sitting in earlier, when he thought everything was normal. She rubbed her hands together nervously. I could see the wheels turning in her head. The guilt was setting in, and I wasn't sure if she was trying to process her role in all of this, or figure out how to salvage her reputation. I wasn't concerned with her anymore. I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling the power shift back to me. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The thing is, I said, almost to myself, I've been taking care of everything. While you've been getting all the perks, I've been keeping this marriage together. I've been keeping this house together. And what did I get in return? A husband who thinks it's okay to lie to me, to use me as a bank account. I stood there, letting the silence stretch out. Richard was upstairs, probably packing his things, but I didn't care. Not anymore. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He hadn't been for a long time. Turning back to Alexis, I took a step closer. You should leave. I'm done with this. I'm done with him. Alexis's eyes darted between me and the door. She didn't move at first, as though she were frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. Go, I repeated, my voice now as cold as I could make it. Before I make you leave. She stood slowly, her eyes downcast, still processing the weight of what was happening. She picked up her purse, slinging it over her shoulder with the same detachment she'd shown walking into the house. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back at me. I didn't know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She left the house quietly, leaving me standing in the living room, the aftermath of the storm swirling around me. I could hear Richard moving upstairs, probably trying to figure out how to salvage the last bit of his dignity. But I didn't care. I was done. Richard stood there, his face pale, eyes shifting from me to the pile of evidence on the coffee table. I could see the weight of it settling on him, the realization that everything I had suspected, and everything he'd been lying about, was now in front of us, plain as day. His mouth opened, then closed, like he was trying to find words, but nothing came out. I watched him, my hands clenched at my sides, my stomach hollow. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I would have to confront the truth about everything. Fiona, Richard said, his voice wavering. I didn't mean for this to happen. I wasn't thinking straight. I interrupted, cutting him off. My voice was icy, controlled. I had no room for his excuses, no more lies, no more sorries. I'm done with all of it. He opened his mouth again, but this time no words came. I could see the panic rising in his eyes, his body stiffening. He wasn't used to me like this, calm, unwavering. He was used to the woman who would quietly accept things, the one who wouldn't ask too many questions, who would overlook the cracks, the deceit, the slow erosion of our marriage. But not anymore. That woman was gone. I've been working myself to the bone, Richard. 2 jobs while you played doctor. I built this nice house, this company. My voice didn't shake. I had worked too hard for it to. And you've been spending it, my money, on her, I said, nodding toward the pile of receipts and bank statements that lay before us. While you pretended everything was fine, you were bleeding us dry. He flinched. I saw it, a brief moment of guilt flashing across his face before he masked it with a weak attempt at a smile. It's not like that, Fiona, you don't understand. She makes me feel alive. You know, I've been struggling with the practice. It's been a tough few years. I know about the practice, Richard, I said, the words tight in my throat. You've been lying to me about everything. You've been hiding credit cards, taking out loans in our names. I've been paying for everything. And you've been pretending you're some high-flying doctor, while I've been the one keeping us afloat. All of it. I paused for a moment, letting the silence sink in. It was the quiet before the storm, the calm that let him know I wasn't asking for an apology anymore. I was demanding respect. I was demanding the truth. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't know how to tell you, he muttered. I thought things would get better with time. Things didn't get better, I said, my voice cold as steel. They got worse. You've been spending tens of thousands of dollars, lying about your business, and you didn't think I would notice. I reached for the credit card statement again, flipping it open to reveal the charges that told the full story. Here, Richard. A dinner at some place called Leonard Dan 4070. Jewelry purchase at Tiffany's 8200. A weekend stay at the Ritz 600. Tell me again how things were just fine. His face went pale. He ran his hand through his hair, shaking his head. Fiona, please, I didn't mean for it to get this far. I felt a cold, bitter laugh rise up in my chest, but I swallowed it back. This wasn't about him. This was about me, my life, my money and my future, and you thought I wouldn't notice. That I wouldn't see what you've been doing behind my back. Do you think I'm that naive? I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice breaking. I was trying to keep it together. I thought I could fix it, fix it. I repeated, stepping closer to him. You've been spending my money to prop up your ego, while pretending everything was fine at home. You haven't even tried to fix us, Richard. You haven't even tried to fix yourself. His eyes filled with guilt, but there was something else there too, something darker. Fear, real fear. He knew deep down that this was the end, that he had no more cards to play, no more lies to hide behind. You've wasted everything I've worked for, I continued, my voice rising in pitch. You've betrayed me in every possible way. And you're still standing here, asking me to forgive you. Do you think I'm that stupid? He looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time in so long. The guilt was raw on his face, but the shame, it was more than just the financial betrayal now. It was the realization that I was no longer the woman who would stand by, quietly tolerating his mistakes. I've given everything to this marriage, Richard, I said softly, my voice thick with emotion, and you've thrown it all away. You think I don't see you, but I do. You've spent years pretending to be something you're not. We have been pretending. Richard opened his mouth again, but no words came out. He didn't know what to say anymore. And for once, I didn't need him to. I'm done, I said firmly, my decision cutting through the air like a blade. I'm done pretending. I'm done covering for you. And I'm done with this marriage. The room was silent. I let the words hang between us, the finality of them settling into the space. He didn't say anything. He didn't apologize. He just stared at me, his face full of regret and panic. I want you to leave, I said finally, after a long, aching pause. Pack your things. You can stay at a hotel or go to a friend's, but you're not staying here. Richard's lips parted, and I saw the flash of defiance in his eyes for just a second. Then, it crumbled. The last of his resistance gave way, and he slumped, shoulders heavy under the weight of everything he had done. I'll be gone in an hour, he muttered, his voice hollow. I just need to gather my things. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The decision had already been made. As he turned to leave, I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was free, and I wasn't going to let him take that from me. I watched him walk away, but I didn't feel the pain I expected. The house felt quieter now. But this time, it wasn't oppressive. It was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I was breathing again. and this time, it was on my terms. Richard had just started up the stairs when I heard him stop mid-step. I didn't need to look at him to know what he was feeling. I could hear it in his breath, shallow and quick. And I could feel it, the panic. He knew without a doubt that this was the point of no return. I turned toward the door as it opened again. This time, Richard didn't hesitate. He walked in quickly, but I could see the moment he saw us, me and Alexis. His eyes widened, like he had no idea what he was walking into, even though he had to have known. His face went pale when he saw the two of us, standing across from each other like the pieces of a puzzle finally being fitted together. He took a step back, as if trying to create some distance between the truth and himself. "Alexis," he said, voice cracking just slightly, What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Alexis said smoothly, her voice a little too calm. "Surprise." She didn't even flinch. She was playing her part with perfect precision. He didn't answer, but the panic was written all over his face. He looked at her, then at me, then back at her again. His mouth opening and closing like he was trying to figure out which lie would be the most convincing. "I didn't know you were. You didn't tell me she was here," he stammered. His eyes darting from Alexis to me and back again, but I wasn't going to let him squirm his way out of it. I stepped forward, my voice steady, but every word coming out of me felt like a hammer to his world. "I'm done, Richard. With all of it. You've lied to me for months. You've been hiding this from me. And you thought you could get away with it. With her. With all of it." His face tightened, and he stepped forward, like he was going to try to take control of the situation. But I was done letting him control me. "Fiona, please." I cut him off. "I don't need your lies anymore." I lifted my hand, pointing to the pile of credit card statements and receipts on the coffee table between us. "I know about the dinners, the shopping sprees, the weekends away. Mike Money has been paying for everything while you've been pretending to be a successful doctor. Meanwhile, I've been covering the debts. Your debts." Richard didn't answer. He stood there, mouth open, like he wanted to say something, but the words weren't coming out. He couldn't lie anymore, and I could see it in his face. The guilt, the shame, the panic. I took another step closer, making sure he could feel the weight of my words, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You've been draining us dry. I've been holding everything together, Richard. You think you're some victim here, but you're not. You're the one who has been playing me, playing her, playing everyone." Alexis had been standing still, watching all of this unfold with wide eyes. I could see the confusion in her face, like she couldn't figure out how to react to the reality of what was happening. But she didn't say anything. She just looked from Richard to me, waiting for him to clean up his mess. I turned to her. "You've been a part of this too. Don't act like you're innocent here. You've been living off of my money, enjoying the fruits of my labor. You thought you were the one winning in this little game, but look at you now." Alexis shifted uneasily on the couch. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words never came. She was silent, like the reality of the situation was finally starting to sink in. I wasn't some naive wife anymore, blindly believing everything Richard had told me. I wasn't the woman who used to tolerate his lies. "You've been living in a fantasy," I said to both of them, "and now it's time to wake up." Richard took a step back, his eyes darting around, looking for some escape, but there was nowhere to go, not anymore. "Fiona, I didn't mean for it to get like this, He trailed off, unable to finish. I stepped closer to him, my voice now cutting through the air like a blade. "You didn't mean for it. Richard. You didn't mean for the thousands of dollars you've spent on her. You didn't mean for the credit cards, the loans, the secret accounts you've hidden from me. No. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you're trying to make me believe you've been the victim. Spare me." His eyes fell to the floor. He couldn't meet my gaze. "You've lied about everything," I said, feeling the weight of it in my chest. "Your practice has been failing for years, but instead of asking for help, you've been lying to me, using my company's success to cover up your mistakes. And now you've dragged her into it. You've dragged all of us into your mess, Richard, but not anymore." I stepped back, standing tall, the anger and betrayal burning inside me, but now it was a controlled fire, one I could use. "You're going to leave, now. And you're going to leave off my house. You don't get to come back here. You don't get to come back into my life." Richard opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. "No. I'm done. This is over. You're leaving now." He didn't argue. He knew there was no point. He knew the game was up. I turned to Alexis, watching her closely. "You should leave too," I said, my voice firm. I don't want you here anymore. You're not welcome in my life. She hesitated for a moment, then stood up slowly, her eyes never quite meeting mine. I didn't know, she murmured, as if she thought that would make any difference. It doesn't matter, I said coldly, watching her walk to the door. You made your choices. Now you'll live with the consequences. As she left, Richard remained standing in the same spot, his face unreadable. The silence in the room felt suffocating, but I stood there, unwavering. Pack your things, Richard, I said, my voice steady. I want you gone in an hour. He nodded stiffly and walked up the stairs, and I stood still, listening to the sound of his footsteps moving above me. It felt surreal, like a dream. But I wasn't dreaming, this was real. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had control over something, anything. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew it was over. For good. I sat across from Palmer, the lawyer I'd chosen to help me navigate the nightmare Richard had created. Her office was sleek and immaculate, the kind of place that exuded power, that made you feel like you were dealing with someone who knew exactly how to win. She was calm, composed, and professional, but there was something about the way she looked at me that made it clear she wasn't just here to represent me. She was here to make sure I walked away with everything I deserved. Palmer didn't waste time with pleasantries. She got straight to the point, opening a thick file in front of her and laying out the hard truths. Your situation is complex, she said, her eyes scanning through the documents. We're dealing with both your assets and Richard's debts. This won't be a simple split. I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. I want to make sure the business stays mine. Richard doesn't have any stake in it. She looked up at me, a sharp smile curving her lips. Good. That's very important. Your company is your primary asset, and given you founded it before the marriage, Richard has no claim to it, legally speaking. We'll make sure that's airtight. I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was fighting for something that was slipping through my fingers. The business, the thing I'd built from nothing while supporting Richard's dreams, was still mine. No one could take that from me. But, Palmer continued, we need to look closely at Richard's practice. He's been hiding a lot from you, and we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. I hadn't told Palmer everything yet. I hadn't told her how Richard had been dipping into our joint account, using my income to cover his practice's losses. All while pretending that everything was fine. How he'd been spinning this web of lies, hoping I wouldn't notice. But now, as Palmer pulled out another set of papers, I knew we were going to lay everything bare. She continued, flipping through more documents. His practice is in trouble. But that's not all. We need to investigate how deep this goes. How much debt he's accumulated and where it's been hiding. He might have been using your name for more than just his medical expenses. We'll need forensic accountants to go over everything. I nodded again, taking it all in. I had to stay focused, no matter how overwhelming it felt. And his affairs, I asked, my throat tight. Will that affect the settlement? Palmer's expression softened slightly. It will. The fact that he's been wasting marital assets on his mistress, on vacations, dinners, gifts will work in your favor. Judges don't look kindly on that. We can argue that he's dissipated marital funds, which could significantly affect the division of property. I felt my chest tighten at the thought of it, the fact that Richard had spent so much of our money on her, while I had been the one keeping everything together. The betrayal stung, but Palmer's words gave me a sense of control. It wasn't just about the money. It was about making sure that Richard faced the consequences of his actions, of how he'd used me, of how he'd used Ethos. Palmer paused for a moment, her eyes meeting mine with a calculated gaze. You need to prepare yourself. This will be difficult. We might have to fight for every penny. And if Richard decides to get aggressive, if he refuses to settle, you need to be ready to take this to court. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I'm ready. I've already been living in this nightmare. I won't let him drag this out any longer. Palmer leaned back in her chair, her hands steepled in front of her. Good. I'll start working with my team to gather all the information. We'll need to move fast before Richard tries to pull anything else. I nodded, my mind already racing through the next steps. The anger that had been bubbling inside me was starting to fade, replaced by something else, something sharp and focused. I wasn't going to let Richard get away with this. Not anymore. After the meeting, I sat in my car, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on me. I had a long road ahead, lawyers, paperwork, court dates. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I had a plan. I was going to take back control of my life. When I got home, the house felt empty without Richard. The silence was oppressive, but it was also peaceful. It wasn't the oppressive silence I'd grown accustomed to, where his lies and the weight of his presence suffocated everything. No, this was different. This silence was mine. I had reclaimed it. I sat at my desk, staring at the empty space where Richard's things used to be, and I made a promise to myself. No matter what happened in the coming weeks, no matter how messy things got, I would come out on top, I would rebuild, and I would move forward, unburdened by the past. The next day, I made the call to the forensic accountant Palmer had recommended. I needed to know the truth about everything. I needed to know how much of Richard's financial world had been built on lies. It was time to take this fight to the next level. I wouldn't stop until I had everything I was owed, and I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Richard, stand in my way. The divorce was finalized faster than I could have imagined, even though the process felt like it had taken years. For the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The court papers, the signatures, the legal fees, it was all behind me. I could breathe again, and the air felt cleaner, even though it was still tinged with the remnants of everything Richard had done. I sat in my office, staring out the window at the skyline. It was a crisp, clear morning, and the city below seemed alive, full of possibilities I hadn't dared imagine in a long time. My business was thriving without the cloud of Richard's failure hanging over it. I wasn't just surviving, I was growing. The expansion plans I had been waiting for were already in motion, and it felt good to know that I was in charge of every decision, every direction. There were no compromises now. No sacrifices for someone else's dream. It was all mine. But even as I felt the momentum building, there were still moments when I felt the emptiness left by the years with Richard. The quiet at home, the one that once felt so lonely when he was still here, had become something different. It wasn't just silence. It was freedom. I was learning to fill it with my own voice. The phone buzzed, snapping me from my thoughts. It was a text from Gita. Dinner tonight. We need to talk about something. I smiled at the message. Gita had been a constant through all of this. She was the friend who had been there when I didn't want to hear the truth, when I was too blind to see what Richard had been doing. But Gita never judged me. She had always been there, standing by my side, ready to help me pick up the pieces whenever I was ready to face them. I texted back quickly, setting the time, then closed my laptop and grabbed my coat. Dinner with Gita had always been more than just a meal. It was where I would ground myself, find balance, and remind myself that I wasn't alone in this world. Gita had seen me at my lowest, but she was here now, with me as I rebuilt everything. When I walked into the restaurant, Gita was already there, sitting at our usual booth, her back straight and her eyes sparkling. She smiled as soon as she saw me, her energy filling the space between us. Gita had always been that person, the one who could make everything feel brighter, even when things were hard. I swear, you get more beautiful every time I see you, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. I laughed softly, shaking my head. It's the wine, I swear. We both laughed, the tension of the past few months lifting just a little bit. But there was something else in her gaze now, something more serious. I could feel her watching me, not just with the familiar warmth, but with something deeper. So, tell me, she said, her voice softer now, how are you really doing? I took a breath, letting the question settle. It was the question I hadn't really answered for anyone, not even for myself. I'm better, I said finally, my voice steady but heavy with the weight of the truth. I'm in control. It's just a lot, you know. I know, she said, her tone full of understanding. You're doing great, Fiona. But don't forget to let yourself feel everything too. You don't have to be strong all the time. I nodded, feeling a tightness in my chest that wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about the years I had spent believing in something that wasn't real. It was about the life I had built, the sacrifices I'd made, and how much of it had been for someone who never truly saw me. I keep thinking about all the years I spent thinking everything was fine, I said quietly, my fingers tracing the rim of my glass. How much I let slide, how much I let him take from me. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for that. Fiona, Gita said gently. You were doing the best you could with the information you had. And now you're doing what you need to do for you. That's what matters. I met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words sink in. She was right, the past was gone, and all I had now was the present, the one I was building. The one I would fight for, no matter what. I'm ready for the future, I said, finally letting myself feel the shift that had been happening for months now. I'm ready to build something that's just mine. Something that's all mine. Jita smiled. And it was the kind of smile that made everything feel like it was going to be okay. That's the Fiona I know, she said. And you're going to crush it. Dinner passed in a blur of laughter and conversation, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The divorce was over, but the journey was just beginning. As I walked out of the restaurant with Jita, the night air was crisp, and the city felt full of possibility. I had a future now. It wasn't the one I had planned, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't the woman who had spent years holding everything together for someone else. I wasn't the wife, the partner, the one who had to sacrifice everything for someone else's dreams. I was Fiona, and I was ready to embrace the life that was waiting for me. A new chapter had begun.